Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all. Welcome and thank you so much for joining today's Youth Foresight webinar on youth shaping pollution, driving research, and generating evidence. Organized by Generation Unlimited with the support of International Youth Foundation, Qatar Fund for Development, and Yaba College of Technology, Locals, Nigeria. This session is led and facilitated by young people and it is built around youth voices. The research you are about to hear was carried out by young researchers with coordination and participation support from Generation Unlimited and partners. We are also bringing these findings into conversation with people involved designing, supporting, and funding programs because the point is not for youth with research to sit in its own corner. It is for young people's evidence and perspective to inform the discussion and decision to shape policymakers. Right now, it's time to let's start today's webinar. We are starting now, and to open up us, I am joined by Jotin Tripathi, Monitoring Evolution Research and Learning Specialist at Generation Unlimited. Jeet leads the MERL at GenU and brings over 10 years of experience monitoring and evaluation, research and impact evaluation with organizations such as UNICEF, the World Bank, GPAL South Asia, and Parfum India.
Thank you, Afroza, for that overall introduction and all of the helpful guidance for today's webinar. Hello, everyone. A very warm good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We know this is a busy time, and attending yet another webinar is itself a significant act of commitment. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar is an extension of our celebration of International Youth Day earlier this month, where we as a sector reflected collectively on why youth livelihoods is one of the most defining challenges of our generation. Over the next decade, 1.2 billion young people will reach working age, but only one third of them are expected to find jobs, which leaves us with a potential gap of nearly 800 million young people whose aspiration and potential might go unmet. And addressing this challenge requires a lot of investment, a lot of innovation and partnerships, but it also requires evidence. Which approaches work, for whom, under what circumstances, and how do we best enable young people to find meaningful and decent work? If all of these questions had already been solved, then this would be a very short webinar. And then some of us might need to find different jobs. But that's why we have today's webinar, so we can attempt to brainstorm this challenge, particularly through the lens of how we generate the evidence. Now, it is our firm belief that young people participate in programs and in research in many ways, right? But very often they only participate either as beneficiaries or study respondents or survey input providers. Organizations often collect information from young people, but as a sector, we believe we can do so much better in terms of involving young people in deciding which questions should be asked, interpreting what the findings mean, and determining how these findings can influence programs and policies, which is where the real impact lies. So youth-led research is a critical bridge that can help us address this gap by combining sound research methods on one hand with young people's lived experiences, technical expertise, and above all, their creative problem-solving capacity on the other hand. And we found so far that young researchers can identify questions that others may overlook, and importantly, challenge assumptions that institutions and systems may hold. And we reflect this thinking at GenU, where youth-led research is not just about making research more inclusive, but about producing evidence that is more relevant, grounded, and useful with youth leadership. It's an important priority, and it helps us put the why in GenU's public-private youth partnership or PPYP model. Recently, we worked with the Qatar Fund for Development, and we're very glad to have Shaikha with us today. We've worked with them to rigorously document our experiences in putting this through practice through a policy brief on youth-led research, which I will request my colleague Hoai to drop into the chat. We will see some snapshots of this during today's session. In a short while, you will hear from two young researchers, Jin Irfan, who was part of our university content collaboration, and Boluwatife Omoni, who is part of the Young Participatory Action Research under the GESP program. We will also hear from our partners, Pierre Campbell from the International Youth Foundation and Shaikha Al-Shaibi from the Qatar Fund for Development. So we look forward to this exciting discussion on youth-led research. We hope to share honestly what we've all learned from engaging with young researchers through both flexible and structured partnerships. We're also equally here to listen, so we really welcome your advice today, bilaterally or later on, in terms of what funders, universities, and development organizations can do differently and do better to equip young researchers to support their work and to ensure that evidence driven by youth influences real decisions. So with that, I am delighted to welcome you to today's conversation and most importantly, hand the floor over to our young researchers. So back to you, Afroza, for the next one.
Thank you so much, Jeet. I'm actually hear you what you are telling us. Thank you so much for setting the scene so well. So let's now move on to the presentation by two young researchers. First up is Omunio, a researcher with the GESP Youth Participatory Action Research and Evolution team in Nigeria. Through GESP Yaba Teach program, she completed a web application development training and was later selected to participate in the Young Participatory Action Research and Evolution. As a young researcher, beyond this, she studies geology in university now. Her team looked at digital skills training for girls and young women in Nigeria. They are actually building skills of women, Nigerian women. What is working, what is not, and what needs to change. So now, Omonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Afroza. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now. My name is Boluwatife Omoniyi, a beneficiary of the Web Application Development Program under GESP Yabatech, and also a final year student at the University of Lagos. And through this program, I've had the opportunity to become one of the 20 young researchers trained under the YPARE program. So we conducted a research focused on the barriers affecting girls' access to digital skills development and how these skills can better translate into employment and other meaningful opportunities. And that's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you today, from access to employment, addressing the barriers to digital skills development for Nigerian girls. Okay, so I'll start by explaining what YPARE is. YPARE stands for Youth Participatory Action Research and Evaluation. So yeah, young people are not just participants in someone else's research. We actually carried out the research ourselves, and we are given the skills to gather information, analyze what we found, and also communicate our findings. Okay, so what exactly did we study and why? So we're divided into 5 teams, and each team looked at a different issue affecting girls and digital skills. We looked at gender stereotypes, access to computers and the internet, economic barriers, the role of social media, and how digital skills can prepare young girls for employment. So basically, we wanted to know what exactly are the things preventing girls from fully benefiting from digital skills opportunities. Okay, so but before we were able to carry out this research, we had to learn how to actually conduct it, and we worked with this framework. We learned how to identify the issue we wanted to study, develop our research questions, and eventually plan out how we would carry out the research. Then we moved on to collecting, and communicating our findings. Okay, so what did we find? So we got that economic barriers significantly limited girls' access to digital participations, and also owning a phone is not the same as having access. It is very possible that a girl has a phone, but yet she's not able to do some things because the tech skills and opportunities that they require some software that phones might not be able to work with. So owning a phone is not the same as having direct access to the things that they need to do. Also, gender and social expectations can shape participations. So digital skills prepare girls for employment. And one of the participants shared with us that some facilitators support boys much more than girls in the training that she attended. And that is very, very discouraging already because they are concentrating on guys as compared to girls, and it's very discouraging. So when we brought all of these 5 studies together, we started to see a very clear pattern. So other than money and access to devices, gender expectations, support from facilitators, and even support from parents could also affect a girl's experience. At the same time, we also saw that safe learning spaces and female role models can make positive differences because girls felt much more confident when they could learn in a supportive environment and also see other women succeeding in technology. So all of these challenges are connected somehow. A girl can be interested and capable, but she might still have several things standing in her way. So from our findings, we discovered that firstly, girls are very interested in digital skills. The problem is not lack of interest here. The challenge is that interest alone is not enough. So girls still need affordable training, the right devices, internet access, and people that can actually support and encourage them because after gaining these skills, they need opportunities to actually use them. So the message from our findings is very simple. Girls need access, support, and the right opportunities. All right, so one area I think programs can improve is on continued mentorship. So after our findings, we discovered that having someone to guide you, even after your training, can make it very easier to know what your next step should be, which is something that the girls complained about. Another is access to devices. So devices should be made readily available to girls as much as possible. And finally, safe learning spaces matter a lot. Like the All Girls Tech Hub in Yabatech is a very good example of a safe space where girls can actually learn and build their skills comfortably because there's no hindrance, there are no limitations for them. So support basically should not just stop because the training has ended. It should also continue even after the training has ended. Okay, so now what do young people actually need to turn these skills into opportunities? They need exposure. Young people need opportunities to connect with people that are already working in the field. They need practical experience through internships, freelancing, and working on real projects. They need mentors that can guide them. Good portfolios, yes, they need good portfolios that can showcase what they've done and what they can actually do. And based on everything we found, we came down with about 3 main recommendations. So firstly, it is important to make digital skills training very easy to access, especially by reducing the cost of training and improving access to devices and the internet. So secondly, girls need supportive learning environments with mentors readily available and female role models that can equal support during training. It will be very helpful to help them with internships, freelance work, and also professional networks and potential employers too, because in the end, it's not enough to just teach a girl a digital skill. It is also important to give her a fair chance to do it. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my slide now.
Thank you, Omonio. it's really powerful and actually great to see such a concrete example of young people leading the research process from start to finish. And actually, the skills development of women is such a important issue now. So the focus of digital skills feels particularly timely as AI and technology are rapidly reshaping the labor marketing and what young people need to participate in it. And that naturally raises the next question: how do young people move from developing relevant skills to applying them in real world settings and navigating their transition into work? That brings us nicely to our next presentation. Thank you, Omunio, again, which looks at work-based learning. The first presentation will see the uh, technical part, and now we are see our next presentation, which looks at work-based learning and the role it can play in connecting learning with real labor market opportunities. So GenU is part of GenU-University Content Collaboration Initiative and has just graduated from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs this summer. Congratulations, GenU. She and her teammate looked at how based learning case studies and propose a diagnostic model to access and upgrade WBL program quality. Jenner, are you hear us? It's over to you, and thank you for joining with us. Now it's your time.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Afronza, for the lovely introduction. Let me share my screen right now, and let's get started. Okay. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are. My name's Jinar. I'm here to share a little bit behind the thinking of from the placement to resiliency and how we are rethinking the work-based learning and from the quality to the actual job retention and economic sustainable outcomes. First, I want to start with the team quickly. My name's Jinar. I'm here on behalf of my team with Xinxue, my colleague, who sadly is not here. So first, we want to sort of, look into the reason why work-based learning is more important than ever, since it has become a very critical bridge between the education and work. And echoing my fellow panelists just mentioned, right? Like we need those work-based learning experiences such as internships, apprenticeship, freelancing opportunities, and real projects to hone in the skills that young people actually are learning now. Because specifically the transition period between post-exiting of a training program to a stable quality work, it's rapidly changing in nowadays labor market. Specifically focusing on digitalization and AI, it's reshaping the skills that employers and industries are needed. That a lot of time the traditional system, it's not really up to date. And there is really for young people the growing pressure to link learning with the workplace experience. But if that quality of the experience it's being goodly measured, it's a question mark, and that's what's driving the thinking behind our research. And here I just want to show like a really quick visual. We sort of bring thinking this way, that whether the placement can they be measured in the long-term retention, short-term retention, and are the skills that gained in the process can be advanced in their later on the more mid long-term work retention, wage mobilities, and job stabilization. That's very much the thinking. And what we did was we first, we examine the work-based learning as a system. So it's not really just a training program. So we're looking into sort of how the ecosystem and specifically sort of, the research, literary policy reviews that's already existing in that space, and how the job retention conversion rate is being measured, and specifically across the country context between China and Germany. And secondly, the sort of like comparative case studies between China and Germany really allow us to do a in-depth analysis of two really different, contrasting work-based learning systems. The China being more rapidly expanding versus when Germany is already established and has a very long record of dual system for the work-based learning ecosystem. And then lastly, but not least, we also conduct a series of interviews with practitioner youth who are facing those challenges, to take things to their insight and the key stakeholder perspective to inform our model development. Sorry, let me go back. Okay, so just quickly goes into those two systems that both have the work-based learning challenges, right? And for China, it is an expanding context and market, but the alignment in that space is actually pretty scattered. The labor market absorption rate has not been really up to date with the rapid expansion of work-based learning programs such as internships, apprenticeships. There is a strong education to industry integration agenda, but the sort of, the placement metrics, it's pretty obscure, and employment quality is very skewed in that way. And as well as at the same time, the gender equality, specifically for young women, the transition inequality is still remain large in the system. For Germany, it is a more established system, but however, the long-term adaptation for certain occupation and gender segmentation still persists across many sectors that are traditionally more dominant by male. So that lead us to sort of inform to our thinking of the work-based learning quality maturity model, where we're looking to the 3 stages, which being survival, skills, and resilience, and use that as a mental map to map out the trajectory of how the work-based learning can help better with the higher job retention rate for the young people in the long term. So here we're looking to sort of, in initial placement, the entry of the labor force and sort of the placement rate, and then looking to sort of the compatibility formation, whether the skill is aligned closely with what the young people are aspire to work into that profession, and would the work-based learning experience actually help with their skill advancement, wage, and occupation capacity. And in the long term, we're really looking to the mobility and stability, whether the work-based learning are actually improving the young people's ability to remain employed and in the progress. And here it's a little bit hard to read from the bottom, from the top, but really, what we want to see is sort of this shift from those 3 key perspectives, where we track the outcome in the increments of 12, 45, 36 month period post the work-based learning placement. And then we really want to look into the disaggregated outcome by gender, occupation sector, and participant characteristics. And really, and also loop in the sort of the reporting measurement system that to verify if the tailored audit is to detect labor substitution, abnormal internal resiliency, and gender conversion gaps. And lastly, not least, to distill everything we talked about in our research, we want to bring those 3 key aspects to your attention. The first one is we want to, we're really advocating for the measure behind the placement. So this only work if we have a long-term tracking system into place. And then secondly, we want to collect ramp up on the data collecting disaggregating system, that to build a standardized work-based learning data system. And the lastly will be really to introduce the tiered audit to prevent labor substitution. So that means, really to ramp up in the checking and auditing phase that link directly base beyond the placement phases, and to look into sort of independent reviews, interviews, intern staff tasks, comparisons, payrolls analysis to really verify what are the true benefits and what are the forces that the training rather than substitute the entry-level employment. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Pass it over to you, Friza.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you again. And thanks both of you, Omni and Jenna. Think everyone, they both are come from different studies, different education, different work, but underlying the same question. And the question is, are we designing these programs around what young people actually experiences? So let's take into the panel, and in this panel discussion, we have got 4 panelists. So for this next part, Omunyo and Jenna are staying with us. So Omunyo and Jenna, please stay with us. And we are joined by 2 distinguished experts in the space, Pia and Shaikha. Pia is the head of International Growth and Policy at International Youth Foundation. She leads efforts to expand the IYF's global reach and influenced by developing a strategic partnership and policy initiatives that connect young and developing a strategic partnership with young youth with pathways to education, employment, and economic opportunity. With the experience building cross-sector collaboration, she works with leaders across government, philanthropies, and industry to advance sustainable development goals. Shaikha is the head of the Partnership Planning and Evolution section at the Qatar Fund for Development. She leads efforts to strengthen impact global partnership and ensure the effectiveness of development initiatives. With a deep-rooted commitment to sustainable development, Shaikha has played a central role in advancing QFFD's global partnership and strategic engagement. Since joining QFFD in 2021, Shaikha has led and contributed to several high-level initiatives, including Women in Conflict Zones initiative launched at 77th UN General Assembly. Welcome to both, and thank you so much for being here. With the 4 amazing panelists, we are starting this panel discussion now. And a reminder for everyone who are joining today's webinar, please drop your question in the Q&A box and we will get to them shortly during the Q&A component of the event. So my first question is Omunio. And Omuni, you are working with actually the young women and girls for their skill development. So I have a question to you, and that is, as we dive into our broader discussion, let's start from you actually, because I see your first of your presentation. Can you walk us through what the process looks like, how you got involved, how you ran your research, and what the experiences was like on the ground? Omunio, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so you asked me to walk you through what the process looks like for me, how I got involved. Okay, so I got involved in YPARE after participating in the GESP skills training under Yabatek. So I was trained on web development, web application development, and after the training, about 20 of us were selected to becoming young researchers. So there was a project for us to work on. But before we started, we had some training on research, things like data collection, analysis, report writing. Eventually, we were divided into about 5 groups, and each group worked on a different topic around digital skills for girls. And so for our research, we used things like surveys, focus group discussions, and interviews. We spoke to girls across places like University of Lagos, Yaba College of Technology, and the All Girls Tech Hub here in Yaba Tech, and also underserved communities in Lagos, Nigeria. So each study engaged about 45 girls, and the whole process lasted for about 6 months. And so for me, the most interesting part was actually being a part of the young researchers. I mean, I was actively involved in it, getting to know a problem and preferring solutions to it. So we started seeing that barriers were connected, where girls might be interested in learning skills, but they could not afford it for one reason or the other, while some had restrictions at home. But then we also saw how that supportive environments can also foster interest in girls. So when girls have spaces that they feel very comfortable in, they can thrive and do very well. And personally, I think I really enjoyed being a part of this process because I wasn't just learning about the research. I was actually doing it myself. I was asking questions. I was listening to people's experiences. I was collecting information and contributing to findings. So I think that was like the biggest takeaway for me, that young people can actually be a part of a problem, understanding problems affecting them or people around them, and actually trying to shape the solutions around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanu. Thank you so much for sharing with us about your experiences. That helps a lot of visualize the whole process and your personal experiences being a young researcher after being part of GESP program itself, actually. Sojourner, coming to you with a similar question. You and Omnio brings in this work throughout different contexts, actually. So I am interested to hear where your experience meet. Looking back, which part of the process were most valuable to you as a researcher, and what needs to be in place for youth engagement in research to be meaningful rather than symbolic? And just as importantly, what could have been done better for young researchers, young people who are want to research? So it's over to you, Jenner.
Thank you so much, Afranza. And this research really came from a really genuine place, as both a policy professional have been working closely with youth, and as well as a young person myself, stepping to workforce. So a lot of those youth perspective were greatly existing in those conversations around me, around my community, long before it consolidated into our research. So what really was standing out to me in the whole process was how me and my team would translate those youth experience and perspectives into something that is contingent and contextual to a place that we can be able to measure those sometimes vague, sometimes abstract experiences that highly individualized and personalized. And what we really work in that process was to dive into what are the common thread, what are the policy frameworks that exist before us, and as well as sifting through the interview data that to really find this common ground, and which we sort of translate that into our work-based learning maturity model, and to identify those three stages. And And what I really, really appreciate, and obviously extend my great thank you to both LOL and UNICEF Generation Limited, that, to open this opportunity to share our work, as well as the mentorship from the team that really, working with the professional in labor policy youth engagement has amplified and enriched our experience. And really, if I to think about things in this process that could take this step forward and to really strengthen our model, is that really I want to really call for echoing my panelists that simply more opportunity, more real projects that we can loop in young people and to provide them with the training as well as the mentorship to support them and to success in those environments, because that's really by doing that zoning way to get better and getting closer to the long-term skill gaining, retention the workforce. So yeah, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenner. Thank you so much, Jenner and Omonio. What we are hearing from both of you actually so much useful to us for visualizing how youth-led research looks like in practice. You people actually use your opportunities so well. Also create opportunities for your community, your team, and your country. So including what makes the engagement meaningful and where there is room to do better. You are working to do better for your community, you are working to do better for your own. I would like to widen the lens now from the experiences of young researchers to what this means for how programs are designed and delivered. Pia, I would like to hear from you now. You have just heard from both of our young researchers, and also I hope you will see their presentation. From a technical and program design-based perspective, I actually want to know from you, why does youth-led research matter actually? And where are the important barriers or barriers to see at programs level and system level? If you are explaining with me, we would be happy. So it's over to you, Pia.
Thank you, Afroza. That's a terrific question. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really wonderful to be part of this conversation and an honor to be alongside Shaikha and our young researchers. I feel like I've already learned a lot from the work that you've shared with all of us. From a technical and program design perspective, youth-led research is much more than a participation strategy. It's an approach to producing stronger evidence, making better decisions, and building systems that are more responsive and accountable to young people. There are three evaluation approaches that help explain why this matters. One is equitable evaluation, which asks whose knowledge counts, who defines success, and whether evaluation advances equity. For young people, this is important because they are often the subject's evaluation, but they rarely have influence over what questions are asked or how findings are interpreted. Youth-led research, as we've seen today, recognizes that lived experience as expertise and broadens what we consider valid evidence. The second is participatory evaluation, which focuses on who is involved in generating evidence and making decisions. So rather than serving only as respondents to surveys, for example, young people help define the research questions, collect and analyze data, interpret findings, shape recommendations. This improves relevance while also building leadership, confidence, and agency. And then thirdly, developmental evaluation, which is particularly valuable in complex and rapidly changing environments. So many of the challenges that we all work on, from youth employment to digital skills and workforce transitions, are not linear problems with predetermined solutions. Developmental evaluation helps organizations and young people as participants learn, adapt, innovate in real time. Young people bring these insights that help us understand what is changing on the ground and how programs need to evolve. All three recognize that people closest to an issue bring this valuable knowledge and challenge traditional assumptions about expertise. And all three seek to shift power and create more inclusive learning processes. At the same time, we also need to be honest about the barriers, as you mentioned. So one of the biggest barriers is tokenism, which I think we're all familiar with. A second barrier is institutional readiness. Many organizations, public, private, civil society, support youth engagement in principle, but their governance structures, timelines, procurement systems, decision-making processes were or youth partnership. A third barrier is limited resources. Participation requires funding, mentorship, training, accessible information. Without those investments, participation can be extractive, leading to that first barrier of tokenism. And then finally, often we have unclear expectations about what does youth partnership and youth participation look like? What are the results? Young people and organizations alike may not fully understand who is responsible for what, how decisions will be made, or how research findings will ultimately influence action. So these barriers point toward the solutions. At International Youth Foundation, we think about youth partnership and meaningful youth engagement through several foundational domains that create these conditions for success. First, we need to clearly define roles. Second, we need to establish responsibilities. Third, organizations must provide the necessary resources, whether it's compensation, capacity strengthening, mentorship, etc. Participation and partnership cannot be expected without investment. And finally, we need clarity around expected results. Why are we partnering with young people? What decisions will be informed? What are the outcomes we are seeking for programs, institutions, and young people? When these conditions are in place, youth-led research and youth partnership in program implementation and policy becomes much more than a project activity. It's a really powerful example of equitable evaluation, participatory evaluation, and developmental evaluation in practice. Young people are helping us ask better questions, generate better evidence, and build better solutions. I'll close with this. If we want youth participation to move beyond rhetoric, we all must create those conditions that make it meaningful. Clear roles, shared responsibilities, adequate resources, and a commitment to using evidence to drive results. When those elements come together, young people become not just participants in change, but partners in creating it. I'm honored to be among all of you who are moving this work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective of why youth-led research is matter for the community, the world, and for solving a solution. And the framing you are actually telling us the barrier and the resources we actually need. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And I am mesmerizing to hear your thoughts actually. So Shaikha, we would like to turn to you now. If you are audible, if I am audible to you and you are hear me, I have a question to you. And this is the last question of this panel discussion. You are a key player in the development landscape actually, and based on the QFFD's experiences in the space, how would you think development partners and founders can enable youth-led research, innovation, and meaningful youth participation? So Shaikha, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Afroza, and thank you also for my fellow panelists and for the young researchers for sharing their valuable insights today. So allow me just to try to summarize the last points of today's discussion with the limited time that we have remaining. So I just want to mention that as Qatar Fund for Development and from a partnerships perspective, we really believe that young people, or maybe I believe that young people should not be viewed as, let's say, beneficiaries of our development programs. It might be odd for me to say that, but they should really be recognized as, partners who can share priorities and who could share, their knowledge and test assumptions. And most of all, they should be aspects and actors to shape our solutions. There's a saying that always goes that people who are closer to their, issues are the people who knows what the solutions are. So I'm also very pleased today to share that today marks also the launch of our policy paper in collaboration with the Generation Unlimited, also titled Evidence by Youth for Youth. And the paper actually highlights how youth-led research can strengthen the relevance of development programs while building young people's leadership capabilities. And it also sets recommendations for funders and development partners, which there are 4 aspects that I'd really like to highlight today. Number 1, first of all, I think that we should really give youth the genuine influence. So when we invite youth to participate in our panels and our discussions, youth should not be invited to participate when it's already late. Like, they have to be included in the early stages. We have to make sure that these youth are invited when decision-making people are there, they're being heard, and their research and the analytics of their findings is up to action and can be considered for the next solutions. And sometimes, like in most cases, when we see youth-led research, some people might see it as a secondary valuability, and they would rely on the experts kind of research. But the youth research is very valuable, and you know why? Because they really bring in the live experience of the local knowledge, the access of perspectives, and sometimes big researchers does not really capture that in the detailed way like youth. And the second thing is really the meaningful participation, and that should be really resources like funders like QFFD and other funders, and I wouldn't really put any names and titles. They should recognize the youth-led research as a development investment rather than just as an optional engagement activity. And when we cover the research itself, it should go also beyond the research, because at the end of the day, we want to see the impact, right? So how do we see the impact? We should make sure that there is, and to echo, my fellow panelist, Pia, there should be capacity, there should be training to the youth, there should be mentorship, there should be something as simple as ethical guidance for these youth, just to make sure that the quality is there. So we should really acknowledge the innovation, and it really requires that sort of flexibility. And young researchers, young leaders, they really need to have that space to test their ideas, to learn from what they do and work. They could also adapt to their approaches if we think about it. And then the third point would be to create a balance between youth ownership and institutional support. And here I'd like to tackle one major point, which is, when we support researchers, when donor entities, they support researchers, they shouldn't only let youth they should support youth in a way to navigate the research itself. And the research itself sometimes could be complex, sometimes could be it requires some technicalities. So this is how us funders come in to support those youth through giving them that sort of navigation and pathway to guide them. So we shouldn't we should safeguard them, we should mentor them, but without displacing young people's, of course, voices and taking ownership of their ideas. And maybe last but not least, and this is the main important point that maybe I'd like to raise, is that we really need to create clear pathways from evidence to action. So we should asking young people to conduct research is not meaningful if their findings does not reach any kind of decision making or influence program. So before beginning like a youth-led initiative or a research, institutions and donors should have a clear observation on how these evidence will be considered, because there has to be a plan, there has to be a certain criteria to give hope to those youth who have worked months and maybe years on these research. And maybe last but not least, like as a QFFD, and a central message that I'd like to tackle is like youth participation should not be treated as a separate activity or like a symbolic commitment. It should really be embedded across the full development cycle, like all the way from research to program design to implementation, but also to evaluation when we come up with our decisions to especially our financial decisions to motivate these youth financially. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shaikha. Thank you so much for sharing the experience from the Qatar Fund for Development. It means a great deal to hear this perspective directly from partners involved in those sessions. So we have now, thank you actually. It's a great panel discussion and I am very happy to moderating this. Thank you both four of you for different perspectives, for different genre of work, but we are standing from a same aspiration. Now it's time for the Q&A session, and as we tell you people, we have a Q&A session now, and now let us come to the question from you. We have had some great questions coming through the Q&A box. I will read them out and directly the relevant panel. So now it's time for your questions and answer. So well, I am moving to the first panel questions. It's already 8, so we don't cover all the questions because the webinar actually it's 8 p.m. It's already the closing time. So I am going to the first question, and that is to Jenner. Jenner, am I audible to you? The first question is, what would you say to a young person who wants to get into research but has no idea where to start? Jenner.
Thank you so much, Afronza. Make it quick to wrap it up in time. That, really, firstly, I just want to say for me, I personally think it's really good to start with your community, start with the people within our radius and form partnerships, seek mentorships, and find something that you're truly passionate about and take from there. No research is too big or so small. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenner. Thank you so much. As we are come to the last point of the webinar, I will ensure you people we have got lots of questions, lots of queries. So please mention that. I am requesting you. Your questions are so much important for us, and we all would be happy if you can answer all the questions, but don't worry about it. All the questions will be answered in the forum of the Youth Foresight platform. Now it's time for wrapped up. Thank you everyone who are joining from the first to last of the webinar. Thank you, Jeet, for the great opening remarks, and thank you Omunio and Jenner for sharing your research with us today and for grounding this conversation to evidence generating by young people themselves. Thank you to Pia and Shaikha also being the panelist of today's webinar and bringing your valuable perspective into the discussion and engaging with the findings and recommendations. And thank you to everyone who are joining today, because without you, today's webinar is not be successful today. So thank you.